10 people what addiction is and what causes it, and you'll probably get 10 different answers. Even the experts would have varying opinions of the causes, from conditioned response to personality traits, temperament and character, to genes and heredity, to a breakdown in family values, and so on. Most of these cause theories offer little in the way of hope or a solution to a person with serious addictions. In some cases, addictions lead to an early death and certainly prevents people from growing and reaching their full potential. The effects can also be devastating to friends, colleagues and family. Freedomlife is a residential addiction program founded on Christian principles and a professional application of recovery knowledge. It is helping people get back on track towards a healthy, balanced life by dealing with and developing every area of self, including thoughts, beliefs, mental health, physical health and spiritual health, as all parts of the person interact. The centre accepts people with a wide range of addictions, such as drugs and alcohol, gambling, some eating disorders, sex, relationships, codependency and pornography, workaholism and various other compulsions and addictions.
We tend to see it here, addiction, as a people problem and not just as an addiction problem. The addiction's the coping mechanism.
Peter Carrington and his wife Mary founded the addiction recovery program, now called Freedomlife, at Te Nikau in 1998. They live on site, along with a number of trained staff, at the beautifully situated facility in Paraparaumu, north of Wellington. It is having a high rate of success in the rehabilitation of people with a wide range of addictive or compulsive problems. Peter's extensive counselling background and experiences have influenced many of the steps in recovery used at Te Nikau.
In those years of counselling, I used to see that the bottom line really is just a people thing. Somebody would come in for counselling for a relationship issue or depression or something or other else, and yet the things that they needed to deal with were no different really from somebody who was coming with an addiction. Their way of coping with life may have been different.
From a very early age, I'd been witness to quite a few deaths, people getting hurt or killed in front of me. My earliest recollection would have been about 5 years old when it started, and it went right through my adult life. Alcohol, which was just a coping mechanism that I used to drown out the noises that were going on in my head and the flashbacks and the nightmares that I was having.
We think it's important to deal with the life issues that are a part of why addiction was there, but also to give new ways of living, new ways of coping with life. So the need for a behaviour or a chemical is not present anymore.
People look at you from the outside and think successful business and he's got a nice house, family, but no, it wasn't like that. That was the surface, and that's what I could portray, and I did. I was very good at portraying that everything was fine and I had all the toys, but in real life things were just an absolute mess, you know.
One of the ones that people often get patted on the back for is workaholism. The destructiveness that comes with that is that those folk are just simply not available to their family or friends or spouses or children. It's a bit of a misnomer in some ways. Those people aren't always at work, but they're very often involved in some kind of project or some kind of good works or some kind of busyness.
I threw myself into everything, and then I'd transfer back, you know, to the drinking again, and then, you know, and so I wasn't dealing with anything. I was just transferring from one to the other. You become very good at it.
But there's still a destructiveness within that. They may be very successful in what they do, but in terms of family function, that's often not functioning too well. One of my passions is to let people know that there's help available for a whole range of things that sometimes are seen as addictions, sometimes not. I guess some of the eating disorders, they're called a disorder, but the pattern is much the same. It's a compulsive behaviour that's taken over somebody's life.
From 9 or 8, you know, I didn't like the way I looked and I didn't like my body size. I thought to be accepted that I had to be slim. I also remember my sister gaining a lot of weight, and hearing comments about her being fat and thinking that if I was to get the approval of those that I loved, I would have to stay slim.
For many, there's been some life issues around perhaps feeling at least emotionally abandoned. There may have been a sense of rejection in all sorts of ways.
I tried so hard to please people and get the approval of my dad and those that I really cared about, and it wasn't enough. It was never enough.
Very often there's a build-up of grief. There's people with addictions very often don't know what to do with their emotions.
Because of some of my post-traumatic stuff, I don't have a great range of feelings. The fuse is blown in my head when it comes to feeling. So when I see the feeling of love, I have to imagine what that's like.
And certainly the addictions, whether it's a behavioural one like becoming an adrenaline junkie, or the gambling, or whether it's a chemical one, it takes them out of whatever feelings that they feel, whether it's situational ones. I don't like what's been going on or what has been in my life, or simply I just don't like myself or the way I feel generally.
The first thing I'd think of in the morning would be where I was going to get my fix, which was food, and just eat till I was so sore and like I felt like I was going to explode. And sometimes I think that I was going to die like that. Sometimes I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to die because I've eaten so much and I'm so full. It was like I had my head down the toilet all day, and that I'd get dizzy and my tummy would hurt and my throat would ache, and I'd get like ulcers and splits in the side of my mouth because I'd be all the acid. And I mean, I hated it. I hated being sick and I hated what I did to myself, but I hated myself. So, and the more I hated myself, the more I abused myself.
We seem to live a life in crisis. That's how I look at a lot of my childhood. It was lived as though you've got the accelerator in a car at full throttle. Unfortunately, that there's a price to pay for that.
When I first started work in the early 1980s, most of the people that came onto the program I was working on at that time were primarily alcoholic. That changed to some often with drug issues as well, particularly marijuana in those days. The type of drug that people are using has changed. Over that time, the amount of women presenting for help has increased. Some of the gambling addiction has changed. It used to be mostly horses. Probably 90% of people now are addicted to pokies.
At first it wasn't the excitement. It was because I won a big jackpot, $900. But then as I started to manipulate people for their money, or take it any other way, in the end for me it was like I didn't have to think about anything. I could just go there and just put money in and just push the machine, and I knew in my head that there isn't any milk at home, there's no butter at home, the power's going to get cut off soon because you haven't paid it. I was still drawn to putting that money in. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep at night because I'd be thinking, how could I get the money to repay? It's a real destructive addiction to be in.
Went through a stage of really liking speed and drugs like that because I just wouldn't eat and I wouldn't have to worry about being sick, and I think that was probably, like for me, my drug of choice for that reason, was because it would, when I was using those drugs, I wouldn't need to eat.
For most people, although they may be successful in parts of their lives, much of their life in addiction has been fairly chaotic. So day-to-day routines, day-to-day disciplines are important, giving a sense of security back, a sense of balance, and a sense of doing what's needed.
I had to learn a whole new way of thinking, but as far as the rules and that were concerned, they were put in place because we needed them. No place is going to run without rules.
I learned about routines and balance, and it was really good because I had no structure in my life.
The weekdays at Te Nikau are carefully structured and include a range of activities. The day begins with breakfast, followed by a group meeting, followed by household duties and then a short break. After that, there's a teaching and discussion group up until lunchtime. After lunch, there's a work section which helps to keep the place in order and includes work such as gardening, lawn mowing and general maintenance. Later in the afternoon is a time for personal study or one-on-one counselling, followed by a recreation time, which often includes activities away from Te Nikau, like going to a beach or a museum or walks. The students take turn with dinner preparation, after which there are evening discussion groups. Then it's back to their own bedrooms by 10:30 and lights out at 11 p.m.
It's also a non-smoking program. If we're going to deal with addiction, we deal with all of those. The research over many years now seems to show that those who deal with their nicotine addiction at the same time as other addictions increase their percentage rate of success. One of the important principles in recovery is actually not running life on feelings, running life on our choices. And one of the things that we do emphasise at Te Nikau is that we do have choices, that recovery is made up of a range of choices, and that we need to make those choices based on what's needed rather than on feelings.
Really, being in here is much tougher than being in jail. Because in jail you can't just walk out the gate. You know, you're locked down, everything else like that. You've got no choice but to stay there. Here you have a choice. And those choices are in front of you all the time when you go to class.
I learnt about choices and the fact that I did have a choice in my addiction, and that even if feelings were telling me that I couldn't do something, I could make a decision and make a choice and follow it up with actions.
Te Nikau ruined my drinking because doesn't have the same. Once you start dealing with the issues, it doesn't have the same. Well, to me anyway, it didn't have the same appeal, because once I started getting these things out in the open, the need for the alcohol wasn't there, because there wasn't that to cover up.
The program itself, we say, is a minimum of 6 months. For those who've graduated from our program, the average is probably 8 or 9 months. And that's to give it just a reasonable amount of time to leave a lot of baggage behind often, and to learn some new ways.
If it wasn't for the support that you have here, I wouldn't know where I'd be today.
Te Nikau changed my life, and I'm really grateful to God that He led me there.
But I remember some folk who had medals for courage from the Vietnam War and the Korean War, and yet not have the courage to face themselves and what was going on in their own lives. And I certainly think anybody who's willing to face their addictions and face their life, they deserve a medal themselves.
There is a personal, spiritual and practical framework for living, found in relationship with God and Christian principles. Together with a professional understanding of people and addiction, a structured family environment, the staff work with people towards their recovery. A Christian worldview is taken into account in the process for those who are open to a lifestyle based on Christian principles.
When anybody starts to realise that they've got a problem, is a good time to start searching out some help. That person may be 12 or 13. On our program we take people from 18 years up, but I guess the important thing is that somebody's acknowledging for themselves that there's a problem.
Is your life out of control? Do you want to change but seem trapped in destructive habits? You have a choice. Help is available. For more information, contact Freedomlife on 04 902 5828 or visit the website www.freedomlife.org.nz.